Dr. Y.S.R.Murthy is the founding Vice-Chancellor of RV University, Bengaluru. Prior to it, he worked as a founding faculty member and the registrar of O.P. Jindal Global University, Sonipat, between 2009 to 2020 and contributed to its rapid growth. As a civil servant from 1985 batch IAS and allied services, he also held many responsible positions in the National Human Rights Commission, Ministry of Finance, Prime Minister's Office, President's Secretariat, and Cabinet Secretariat. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree in statistics from the University of Madras, MA degree in human rights from the University of London, and PhD degree from Dr. Ambedkar Law University, Chennai. Dr. Y.S.R.Murthy has published several books, book chapters, and journal articles. He is a national coordinator of SWAYAM, besides being a member of the Association of British Scholars. He is consulted by the Government of Kerala, IGNOU, JNU, Delhi University, and some prominent human rights organizations. He is also the recipient of British Chevening Fellowship. I now invite Dr. Y.S.R.Murthy to address us. Welcome, sir.
Honorable Mr. Justice Permod Kohli and Mr. Pankaj Vohra and Dr. Purushotham Reddy. I'm deeply thankful to the organizers for giving me an opportunity to pay my tributes to late Shri JaipalReddy Garu on his 80th birth anniversary. He was a man of great learning and an outstanding parliamentarian. As a man of principles, he carried a lot of conviction. He belongs to the rare breed of politicians who kept his sons and relatives out of politics. While working in the government as a civil servant, I have seen Mr. JaipalReddy from close quarters on many occasions. His courage and conviction were remarkable. He opposed Mrs. Indira Gandhi during emergency. Rarely we get to see such outstanding parliamentarians. On his birth anniversary, let's remember his extraordinary contribution to public life and to the country. Today, as a student of human rights, I wish to share some perspectives on democracy. Democracy rests on the rule of law and protection of human rights. A healthy democracy requires a vibrant civic space with full guarantees of freedom of speech, expression, freedom of assembly, and association. Today, unfortunately, the civic space has shrunk a great deal. I will cite a few instances. There is a witch hunt against respected human rights activist Mr. Henry Tiffany from People's Watch, who has been working tirelessly over the past 4 decades to secure human rights of women, children, SCs, STs, and others, not only in Tamil Nadu, but across India. 2 days back, I have signed a petition addressed to the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu in solidarity with People's Watch. CBI conducted a raid at the office of People's Watch on 8th January, following the registration of a FIR against them on 6th January under the provisions of IPC and FCRA. Corruption is a serious crime, and no one minds legitimate action by CBI against any such crime. But please consider the following facts. Firstly, it is a belatedly filed FIR in a 10-year-old matter. Secondly, it was already adjudicated before the Delhi High Court, where no criminal offense was alleged. When the NGO, in fact, challenged the matter in the Delhi High Court, the court, as well as the Ministry of Home Affairs, allowed it to use its FCRA accounts for 2 years, for 2014 to 2016. And in 2016, People's Watch challenged the refusal of FCRA certification at the time of the FCRA review. The case is still pending before the Delhi High Court. Suddenly, the matter is resurrected and a fresh FIR is filed by CBI. It is nothing but a vindictive action launched against the organization for their human rights work. One can see that laws are being used to stifle dissenting voices in Indian civil society and curb the important humanitarian work carried out by them. What happened to Harsh Mandar, whose organization faced enforcement directorate raids? How can you persecute someone just because he held different political views? There are many more instances. The current regime and previous regimes have all been guilty of misusing these law enforcement agencies. In a democracy, dissent has an important role to play. Supreme Court Judge Mr. Justice Chandrachud termed dissent as a safety valve of democracy. While delivering the 15th P.D. Desai Memorial Lecture in Ahmedabad, Justice Chandrachud said that the true test of a democracy is its ability to ensure the creation and protection of spaces where every individual voice can voice their opinion without any fear of retribution. He further said, and I quote, democratically elected governments can never claim monopoly over the values and identities that define our plural society. The employment of state machinery to curb dissent, instill fear, and create a chilling atmosphere on free speech, which violates the rule of law and detracts from the constitutional vision of a pluralist society. The destruction of spaces for questions and dissent destroys the basis of all growth, political, economic, cultural, and social, unquote. Very powerful words indeed from the learned judge and very relevant to current times. Criminalization of dissent is the biggest challenge today. Despite legal provisions in IPC and Supreme Court directions on mob lynching, hate crimes keep occurring. There is no serious check on hate speech either. After a lot of prodding by the civil society and courts, FIR has been filed in the matter of hate speeches made against members of a minority community at Dharm Sansad at Haridwar in December. The Honorable Vice President of India, Shri Venkaiah Naidu, deserves praise for coming out openly against such hate speeches. Bullibai app case is another horrendous example of what has gone wrong with our system. It had derogatory references to the Muslim community. Hundreds of Muslim women, including vocal activists, journalists, and top professionals, were listed for auction along with their photographs, sourced without permission and doctored. It came to light after several prominent Muslim women found their photographs uploaded on the Bullibai app and vulgar comments solicited on them. What kind of indoctrination or hatred would have driven young persons, some of them engineering students, to create such an app? It's a very important aspect for reflection. Barely 2 decades back, genocides in the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda were preceded by similar hate speeches. It is very important to remember these critical lessons from our contemporary history. On 7th April 1994, the Hutu extremist-led government in Rwanda launched a systematic attack that within 100 days killed more than 1 million members of the Tutsi minority. They were not killed by weapons of mass destruction, but by rudimentary tools like wooden sticks, machetes, and nail-studded clubs. It was preceded by a systematic hate campaign carried out in the media. Humanity needs to learn lessons from this senseless, mindless slaughter to ensure that there is no repeat of such a gory episode again. Studies have shown that hate speech and hate propaganda were catalysts of the genocidal violence in Rwanda and former Yugoslavia. Both theaters of conflict are perfect examples of what will happen when political leaders and media organizations single out certain groups as less than human. Tutsi ethnic minority members were termed as cockroaches, snakes, and vermin while stressing for their elimination. We cannot unleash hatred and harvest it for polarization Sooner or later, such dehumanizing hate propaganda carried over decades will spiral into communal violence and end in avoidable bloodshed. It does not take rocket science to figure out what decades of hate mongering, indoctrination, radicalization can lead to. Finally, I want to refer to the degrading of democratic institutions. When T.N. Seshan was the Chief Election Commissioner, he brought great repute to the institution by asserting its autonomy. Recently, there were media reports about a meeting convened by a powerful office in the country, ostensibly to discuss electoral reforms. Later on, when questions were raised about the protocol and propriety of calling election commissioners to such a meeting, it was explained that the meeting notice was meant for secretary to the election commission and not to the commissioners. People can read between the lines of media reports and can imagine what has really happened. We need a culture of autonomy in our country and a genuine respect for autonomous institutions. The Right to Information Act was amended a few years back, not for the improvement, but to downgrade the salaries and tenures of central and state information commissioners. A few amendments were also carried out in the Protection of Human Rights Act, which cut tenures of members of the NHRC and State Human Rights Commission and reduce overall effectiveness of this body in practice. NHRC, which exercised a degree of autonomy and independence about 20 years back, is a pale shadow of its former self. The recent utterances of its top leadership have caused a great erosion of its credibility in the eyes of civil society. All democratic institutions must be held accountable by the parliament, civil society, and general public. We need rule of law based society and robust institutions. Democracy is only as strong as its institutions. In conclusion, had Jaipal-Reddy sir been alive today, he would have certainly raised his voice against these disturbing trends and challenges. We can pay a fitting tribute to him by speaking out against dangers to democracy and by upholding democratic ethos. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your insights and covering major issues that are a threat to democracy: criminalization, radicalization, dissent, and human rights violation.